When people told themselves their past with stories, explained their present with stories, foretold the future with stories, the best place by the fire was kept for the storyteller.
Wake up! All right. So my name's Damon Ford, and occasionally my friend Pastor Woody has to go do some things. And sometimes he gives me the great privilege of standing in this pulpit at Sozo. Whenever I preach, it's not a job that I take lightly because it's a serious business. And I really especially appreciate it that I'm in a series with him called Telling Stories. Probably the greatest storyteller that ever lived is Jesus himself. He would come into a community and he would look at people. And sometimes they would ask him crazy questions. And he would answer with a story. On this particular occasion, we're going to be looking at Luke chapter 18, verses 9 through 14. The parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector. Verse 9, he also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and regarded others with contempt. Two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, was praying, "Thus, God, I thank you that I am not like other people, thieves and rogues and adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give a tenth of all my income." But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even lift up his eyes to heaven, but was beating his breast and saying, "God, be merciful to me, a sinner." I tell you, this man went down to his home justified rather than the other. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, but all who humble themselves will be exalted. Let's pray. Father, help us today, not only to hear the words of Scripture, but to apply them to our lives. He starts this parable by saying, he also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and regarded others with contempt. So, he had a specific audience. He was mainly talking to the religious leaders of his day. The funny thing is that even though he was talking to mainly the religious leaders, every single one of us are born with a sin nature. Every single one of us. Modern theology tries to gloss over that. Modern churches try to not talk about that sin nature. Because everybody wants everybody to be good. The problem is, from that sin nature, just like a diamond has many facets, our sin nature has many facets. And the two prominent ones Jesus is pointing out today are self-righteousness and judgmentalism. Now, the Pharisees, who he's going to talk about first, two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. So you got here, one's a religious leader of Jesus' day and the other's a tax collector. So the Pharisee were the religious leaders. The funny thing, though, whenever we talk about Pharisees, we talk about them in a negative sort of context. But in Jesus' day, around Jerusalem, they were looked at as good. They were looked at as leaders. They were looked at it as kind of the people you want to be your neighbor. You know, they was looking at those priests and all that stuff back in their day as good people. And that's why it's so shocking to the people that Jesus was talking to. When he came in there and started telling these stories and calling the Pharisees self-righteous and judgmental, it shocked the people because they didn't really think that about the Pharisees. And then he would contrast one with the most sinful people of their day, the tax collector. Now, the tax collector in Jesus' day worked for the Roman government, but the Roman government did not pay them. The Roman government expected them to get their own money by overcharging the people, by padding the book a little bit, saying, okay, I got to pay Rome this much tax, but you got to pay me this much tax, and then I'm going to skim mine off the top. So how would that make you feel? Wouldn't you hate them people? Huh? Yeah. Yeah. So, even to this day, I don't know about y'all, I don't like paying taxes. But I pay them, because I don't want to go to jail. Alright? So, Jesus says, the two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. Then in verse 11, he says, the Pharisee, standing by himself, was praying thus. God, I thank you that I'm not like other people, thieves, rogues, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give 1/10 of all my income. So you got this guy right here, the Pharisee. First thing he's doing is praising himself. He's talking about all the stuff that he does. You know, God's in the prayer very, very little. He has contempt for others. He looks down his nose at everybody he sees. All right? All right? We got a lot of that going on in modern society today. If you're not in the right group or you're not in the right club, then we're going to look at you like you ain't nothing. Then he had reliance on self. So he was thinking that his righteousness was all these good things he was doing. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with fasting twice a week. I probably ought to fast a couple of times a week. All right? There's nothing wrong with paying 1/10 of my income or whatever I can give to the church. Those are good things. Those are necessary things, but they are not what saves me. All right? They should be an attribute of my relationship with God through Jesus. All right? So I might fast because I'm in relationship to God through Jesus. All right? I give money to the church because I'm in a relationship with God through Jesus, and it's out of a deep sense of gratitude for those things. All right? The Bible says God loves a cheerful giver. All right? If I got to walk in here every week, then there's a problem. And it's not on the outside of me. It's not with the church. It's deep inside of me. Okay? Then, Jesus says, but the tax collector, but the worst of the worst, but the sinner, but the guy nobody likes, the despised among us, he says, but the tax collector, standing far off, he wouldn't even come up there. He knew who he was, and he knew who they thought he was, and he was standing far off, would not even lift up his eyes to heaven, but was beating his breast and saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. So the tax collector, recognizing his own sinfulness, his own character defects, his own issues, his own great need for God's mercy, he beats on his chest and asks God for that mercy. And then Jesus lowers the boom on all the people and all the religious leaders of his day. Verse 14, I tell you, this man, the tax collector, went down to his home justified rather than the other. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, but all who humble themselves will be exalted. And that last part of that is the whole point of this parable. So you got the tax collector's prayer, signifying humility and desperation. God, I'm a sinner. I need you. How many know about the gift of desperation? You ever heard of that? All right. The gift of desperation is in my time of great need, when I finally realize that I'm nothing and God is everything. In that moment of great need, then I call out to him just like this tax collector, just like this sinner. That is the gift of desperation, because it brings me God's mercy. It brings me God's blessing. It gets me up out of the sewer. And I've been in the sewer. I don't know how many of y'all have been in the sewer. But it gets me up out of the sewer. The funny thing about the sewer, when you're coming out of it, you got to kind of shake that stuff off your leg because it try to stick to you. Huh? You might have to change your phone number, your Facebook page, whatever you got to do. Then he gives his confession and prayer, God be merciful to me, a sinner. And the main thing he recognizing in his life, this tax collector, is his great dependence on God. Everybody in here recognizes their dependence on God. How did I know that? Because you got up out of your nice, comfortable bed this morning. You did whatever it is you do. Me and Liz ate a few pancakes. All right? And a lot of times Liz cooks those pancakes on Sunday morning, but I happen to have some of those that come in a box in the freezer, and I put them in the microwave. And we had some visitors at my work the other week, some presidents and all that kind of stuff, and they brought us they come down here from Canada, and they gave us a whole case of maple syrup. And it come in a bottle about this tall, and when my president of my company handed me one, I said, it looked like a bottle of brown liquor. I said, hold up, bottle. I ain't wanting to go to jail today. Because if I take a drink of liquor, that's where I'm headed. All right? To the jailhouse. But it was really maple syrup. And it was good, too, on the pancakes this morning. So, when Jesus says this tax collector went home justified, he's saying that because of his realization of who he was in light of God's righteousness and called out for mercy, that's how he was counted righteous. And again, the point of this parable is God exalts the humble who rely on his mercy, and he humbles the self-exalted. All right. And one of the reasons why it's so important for us church people to practice humility is because without humility, we show a face to the world around us that don't invite him in. We show a face to the world around us that tries to exclude people for a lot of different reasons. And there's a lot of different churches that do that. I got up this morning and I told Liz, I said, I just pulled this chair out. I'm going to tell y'all why. Because I'm 57 years old. I was off yesterday for the first Saturday in about, I don't even know how long. And I spent the whole day cleaning my shed out. When I say cleaning my shed out, I'm talking about moving engine blocks, and Vortex heads, and heavy welders, and I'm a car guy, and I got more junk than I need. So I spent the whole day doing that. So if y'all don't mind, I'm just going to sit right here in this chair. Has Woody ever sat down? Don't tell him. All right. So this morning I told Liz, we're talking about presenting a face to the world that invites them in. Now, I don't know any of y'all's story. I don't know how you landed here at Sozo. I don't know. I called a couple of you this morning, new faces. I met that young lady right there. May God bless me with the longevity that she's had. And I got some 90-year-old people at my church. Let me tell you something. That is a milestone. 90 or above is a milestone. And we just pray that you have many more. And your son there, I know you've been taking care of him for the past 68 years, and we're glad of that too. All right? Because he's kind of like me. He needs a mama. I'm glad that my mama finally got me grown at 42. I was 42 when I finally got grown. So that's good. But I don't know what brought y'all here to Sozo. But something did. And thank God that this church put an inviting face out. You know, there's churches, I told Liz this morning, I said, if you'll just say one word that you want to do it, we'll get that Harley out and ride it with Tucker this morning. She shook her head a little bit, and then she said, all right. And I was glad. Because if she would have told me she didn't want to do it, I'd have had to left her at home. No, I'm just kidding. But there's churches that I couldn't have rode up to this morning on that big loud motorcycle. There's churches I couldn't have come to with my holy pants on. Now they do have, they're supposed to have a patch right there, but anyway. There's churches I couldn't wear these boots in. There's churches, that I have to kind of get dressed up at when I go in there and preach. So I understand that, and there's nothing wrong with that. This just ain't that kind of church. All right? And that's a good thing because this church is presenting a face to the world that says, come on in. Sozo cares. And when Woody reached out to me a while back, normally Penny hits me because I see her all the time. I work with her at the steel plant. So she's in charge of all the bill paying. So if we got anything going on, need a check wrote or bill paid, or I done spent some of my money and they got to give it back to me. Penny's the one that makes sure that happens. So y'all know I hurry up and go see her if something goes on. So normally she's the one that relays the message if they got something to go through. I think this particular Sunday is a wedding or something. All right. But I always count it a great privilege when he gives me the opportunity. And I was especially glad this Sunday because we're in the storytelling thing. We're in this storytelling series of all these different stories that Jesus used to drive home various points. A lot of the times, his points were driven at the religious leaders of his day. Has anybody caught on to the fact that the religious leaders of Jesus' day had a lot of issues? All right? The same thing is true today. The religious leaders of our day have a lot of issues. All right? Think about this one. The Great Commission that Jesus gave us was to go into all the world and make disciples, right? All right, we've sort of got that twisted in the church. Now we want to go into all the world and make people Democrats, or go out to all the world and make people Republicans. If whatever side of the fence we're on, if you ain't on that side of the fence, then you ain't no good. They hate it when I do this in my church. They hate it. All right. But that's okay. Y'all might not like it either. Ain't nobody signing my check over here. So I say what I want to say. Now, the problem is you don't want to live that way. Because what did I just say? You want to present a face that's inviting. You want to invite the world in. If you want to go have lunch afterwards and talk about all that other mess, well, then go have lunch. I'm going to Matthews after this. Every time I come to Tucker, I go to Matthews. Y'all familiar with that place? Y'all been there before? Okay, because that's fixing to pull your Tucker card. If you live in Tucker and ain't been to Matthews, there's something really going on. All right? So, we want to present a face to the world that's inviting. And we can't do that if we're pushing people away based on anything other than Jesus Christ. Okay. So, when Woody told me we were doing a storytelling thing, and I flipped right to the sinner and the tax collector. He sent me a list of all the ones he'd uncovered. Y'all been in this series a little while, right? Okay. So he sent me a list of all the ones he'd covered, and I had to pick from all the rest of them. And as soon as I saw this, I said, okay. All right? And the reason I said okay, because it's an important part of the Christian life that we get from where the Pharisee was at to where the tax collector was at. And for some of us, that's a long journey. For some of us, we never make it. There's churches all over America right now that have never made the jump from where the Pharisee's at to where the tax collector's at. And guess what? When they get to heaven, and they are going to heaven, okay, God don't send people to hell because they got a judgmental, self-righteous attitude. That's not the cutoff, all right? The cutoff is Jesus Christ. That's the cutoff. So a lot of these people, don't you remember Jesus said, man, you know, I can't sit down. Jesus said, many who are last will be first, and many who are first will be last. Didn't he say that? Okay, so when you get to heaven, there's going to be a lot of people that you thought were last that are going to be first. And there's going to be a lot of them that thinks they fixing to get a parking place next to Billy Graham, and they ain't. They got a MARTA card. That's how they're getting it, all right? But it don't matter how you get there, you're still getting there. And my story is a lot like the ones that took a long time to get there, all right? My buddy over there, me and him's from the same hood, all right? South side of Atlanta, growing up in the 70s and the 80s. This is back before it was popular to live over there. This is back when they couldn't pay you to live in Grant Park. They couldn't pay you to live in Kansas County. They couldn't pay you to live on Boulevard off Memorial Drive. They wasn't no white people in the Fourth Ward. All right? They just wasn't none. They wasn't none, and that's because it was all poverty-stricken, drug-induced. When I was a kid, Grant Park was known. Guess what Grant Park was known for? Everybody know what Grant Park is? All right. When I was a kid, Grant Park was known for two things: Willie B. Yeah. All right. And Willie B's most famous thing was they stole his color TV right out of his cage. All right. And the second thing Grant Park was known for was people sniffing glue and putting their glue bags in the trees. All right. And prostituting outside the gates. All right. They did a big documentary on it back in the 70s. So I grew up in a lot of that mess. Thankfully, I had a grandmother who was a devout Baptist woman. And when I was small enough, she would grab me by the hand and drag me to church with her. And even though I didn't know it at the time, she was planting a seed in my heart and planting a seed in my mind that it would take 30 years to sprout. Think about that. How many of y'all got gardens? Not good. I ain't got one either. But if I did, me and her have been talking about it for years. But everywhere there's a garden spot, I done put gravel park cars on and all that kind of stuff. But I got one little section. I think I might have, in a couple of years, I might plant some tomatoes. But if I plant them tomatoes, I don't want in 30 years for them tomatoes to sprout up. I'm going to be gone. And my daughter, I know she's going to sell the house just as soon as she get her hands on it. So there you go. That's what we do. In case y'all didn't know that, when you die, you don't get to take none of it with you. I've learned that because I've been a part of a couple of different funerals, a couple of different will executions and all that kind of stuff. Here's what's going to happen to all your stuff. Some of it's going to go to the dump. Some of it's going to go to the people that love you. And some of it, if it's got value, is going to get sold. Everything with a lot of value is going. It's getting sold. All right? You know, you might keep a vase, a picture. But if you got any diamonds, if you got any gold, you got any houses, cars, bye. You're not taking it with you. All right, so when I grew up on the south side of Atlanta in that poverty-stricken, drug-induced area, sometimes I tell people that back then my mother and father are definite city dwellers, but with a country background. So part of my socioeconomic status and much of my personality falls somewhere between ghetto and get her done. And that's kind of how I operate. All right? So at 10 years old, my grandmother died. What time I got to stop?
No, keep going.
Y'all kidding. Man, don't never tell no preacher that. All right. So, my grandmother passed away when I was 10 years old, and all the Christian influence in my life died with her. Everybody say all.
Oh.
all the Christian influence in my life died with me. My daddy was a heroin addict. He got on methadone in 71. He went to church with us as long as Granny was alive. But when Granny died, Daddy quit going to church. All right? And opened back up his pill business. That's another story. Now, I didn't realize it at the time, but my life was on a trajectory of trouble. How many in here has been in trouble? That's why I like coming over to this church. Huh? Everybody in here raise their hand. Everybody except the little kids. That's good. All right? That's good. I was in a lot of trouble. I had a trajectory of trouble. In other words, trouble followed me. And if it didn't follow me, I would go find it. That's just how it was. So at 10 years old, my life took a turn for the worse. When my grandmother died, I had moved and lived with my daddy. I had moved from my mother. It's a long story. I ain't got time to tell you all, but. And my daddy was a heroin addict for 30 years, and then he got on methadone and got clean. Everybody know clean or clean-ish? In other words, instead of shooting dope and going to prison and robbing drugstores, which is what he did, he'd go to Grady Hospital every morning, take that 110 milligrams. That's the max dose they give you. And he'd be normal, except I wonder why he always nodded off. He sat still, he'd nod off. And I started getting familiar with that kind of mess. And what it led to was a whole series of teenage years that if I had time, I'd tell y'all about this morning. But let's just say it involved juveniles and rehabs and police cars and burglaries and all that kind of stuff. And then, thankfully, at 18, I joined the Navy. Huh? You remember when they sent him off to the Navy instead of prison? Okay, good. You did the right thing. We got the same story. I remember my mama told me, she stopped at breakfast. I had just come out of YDC in Millersville. She stopped down there where I was staying at. My girlfriend was pregnant. I didn't have no job, kind of a job. I had kind of a job. I'd play around with this guy at the Starlight Theater building stuff, but he really just wanted to buy pills, and I just happened to know where to get them. So that's kind of my job. She said, son, you need to do something different than you've been doing. I said, okay, what's that, Mama? She said, you need to join the military. Oh, they ain't going to take me. Next thing you know, I'm on an aircraft carrier in the Mediterranean Sea. So the Navy saved me from myself, but it turned me on to a lifestyle of drinking. Have you ever heard of drunk as a sailor? So my teenage years was drugs. My Navy years was drinking. And after the Navy, I spent 7 years, it was drugs and drinking. All right? Guess what comes with drugs and drinking? Prison. All right? Prison comes with drugs and drinking. So then I had about 10 years in prison. All right? And while I was in there, this is interesting, I remembered something that my grandmother said about a God she knew that would never leave me nor forsake me. And I called the jail chaplain. And I said, how can a person be saved? And he led me through the sinner prayer, and that was 25 years ago. All right? Some people ask me, they say, Damon, how come if you felt the call to preach in 1998, you didn't get ordained until 2019? I say, well, it took a little while for my character to catch up with my calling. What do I mean by that? It took me a long time to jump from where the Pharisee was all the way over to where the tax collector was. All them years in prison, I studied the Bible. All right? I had been to prison a couple times without the Bible, and all that consisted of was fighting and just doing time and all that mess it goes with. The third time, they gave me 20 years for trafficking in methamphetamine. And that's what pushed me to my knees. Circumstances made me willing to believe. And then I knew that there was a God. All that time I spent in prison, guess why I read the Bible most of the time? to gain knowledge. I wanted knowledge. I wanted to be able to stand up in some pulpit somewhere and quote the Bible and show everybody how much Bible I knew and how much Bible I had in me and how much Bible this and Bible that. Do you know you can get a lot of Bible and just very little bit of God? Y'all might not believe that, but you can get a lot of Bible and just a little bit of God. And I'm not saying that God wasn't with me. I did 6 years and 8 months on that 20-year sentence. Then I did 13 years and 4 months professionally, successfully on parole, which is a miracle in and of itself. But God carried me through that. He carried me through it, and I experienced a measure of His grace. But when I walked out of there, I had a fancy degree under my arm. Christian counseling. I was going to help some people overcome their problems. Huh? I had my head held high because I had done been a Christian for 7 years. And I could look down at all y'all. Poor peasants. And then God took me, as we say in the hood, up through there. He took me up through there. I relapsed after about a year. And as a Christian, as a called preacher, I went right back down into that sewer I talked about earlier. And I don't just go in the sewer. I go down there, and I know my way around at the bottom. I'm a bottom feeder. Y'all know what I'm talking about? I go down there, and I know how to maneuver. And for 5 years, that's what I did. And then one day, I was sitting in a chair in my mama's front yard, just like this. I was 42 years old. And in that moment, my life wasn't even as bad as it had been in times past. But I had a thought from God, and the reason I know it was from God is because I heard it, and I responded to it. And that thought said, Damon, if you don't change your life, it ain't never going to get better. That afternoon, I went and checked into a halfway house. All right. I ain't done no methamphetamine. I ain't done no drugs. I ain't drank no liquor, no beer, nothing. For almost 15 years. I met my bride through all that time. And when I got up from that mess, God had delivered me from the Pharisee attitude. What God done during that 5 years as a Christian, wallowing, y'all remember the story of the prodigal? Has Woody covered that yet? I know he can cover the prodigal. I know he can. All right? So when I was finally tired of wallowing in that pig slop, and I went back toward home, it's true. God does come out to meet you. You ever wondered why God comes out to meet you, but he never went to the pigsty to get the boy? You ever wondered that? Because he already knows, if I ain't tired of it, I'm not going to give it up. That's why in the story of the prodigal, that's the only place you see him running out to meet him. Soon as he seen him. But he could have sent an army over. He had plenty of money. He could have hired him a private investigator. That's how these celebrities do. They go pull their kid out of mess. Huh? They save them. They get them out. That don't help. But when I was finally tired of it, God ran out to meet me. All right? And that was October the 10th of 2010. I can remember that pretty easy because that's 10-10-10 day. All right? Since then, he's opened up opportunities for me in so many different places. Some of the stuff that I do, I can't even believe it myself. Some of the stuff that happens to me, I just shake my head and go, how am I here? How in the world am I doing? Like, how am I here this morning preaching to y'all? That's because Woody asked me to come. And I said yes. 15 years ago, he would have called me over here, but he'd wanted the elders of this church to pray over me because I was strung out. Looked like a worm with a gut slung out of me. Look in the mirror in the morning and go, well, you sure are good looking. Jaws don't get, huh? All that old mess. God delivered me from that Pharisaical attitude and gave me the attitude of the sinner, of the tax collector. And that's why that I can go the places that I go and do the kind of ministry that I do. Because I don't look down my nose. Because I know, but for the grace of God, there go I. I know that. And nobody told me that. I learned that on my own. A couple of weeks ago, I do a lot of prison ministry. Wonder why that is. Wonder why that is. So I do a lot of prison ministry. And I take 12-step meetings into the prison, and I take classes into the prison. And I use material from this group called Five Stone Media. And the reason I like their videos is because it's real people that's done real time, that's lived real lives of crime and all that mess that's in those videos that God has turned around. They're powerful stories. That's what we're talking about right here today. There's powerful stories. And the reason I chose to share some of my story with y'all is because I want you to understand you got a story. You got a story. You got a story. You. If there's 3,000 people here, I'd just say y'all. All right? But since they just the right amount of us, I can point to each one of you. You got a story. Now, you might not be a preacher. You might not be a teacher. You might not have a couple of fancy degrees, that Liz hung on the wall for me, and I'd take them at 50 cents and buy me a cup of coffee. But you got a story to tell. All right? And that's where the power comes in. That's where your ministry rests at. All right? Me and this guy, when I come in the door, me and that guy, we connected because we got similar stories. Me and this guy. All right? We got similar stories. All right? My mama passed a few years ago. Thank God for her. Because without her, you've been screwed a long time ago, son. And I don't even know you. All right? So, our stories are what gives us power. Real life stories, man. When we get opportunity to meet people and share, we tell them our story. All right? All the time, people call me, tell my story. Tell my story. All right? So I go tell it. One of the places I go tell it at is in the Georgia prison system because I spent so much time there, and there's great need there. Great need. Any of y'all interested in prison ministry, all you got to do is call me. I know this ain't a Baptist church, but in the Baptist church, we do three things. First, we win them, and then we wash them, and then we work them. All right? So if you want to go to work, call me. If you don't call me. All right? So, when I go into the prison, I'm carrying a message of hope. Right? The other week I get this call. It's been the other week I went. But a few months ago I got a call from Five Stone Media. And they said, hey, would you be interested in being in our next series? I said, yeah. All right. They flew me to Minnesota with a couple more convicts. And we sat and they made films and all this kind of stuff. Now I'm in this film. But the reason I'm telling y'all this is because God can turn it around. How many people do you know with a past like mine and some of y'all that God can take that deep darkness and turn it into marvelous light? All right? He can take the darkest parts of our life and turn it into marvelous light. And that's what we're called to do. And I'm going to close with this. The Great Commission says, go into all the world and make disciples. And all a disciple is somebody that's in the same community, just like what y'all got going. Huh? Disciple, disciple, disciple. Two disciples. Doing service work right there. That's good. Disciple, disciple, disciple. Everybody in this church is a disciple. How do I know that? Don't you come here each week and listen to Woody? All right? What do you think Woody's doing? Huh? He's speaking truth. He's helping people to grow. He's showing you how to live in your life. Think about how your life would be without this church. You slept late this morning. Huh? Maybe got up, flicked the tube on, watched, I don't even know what comes. I'm in church every Sunday. I don't even know what comes on during church. But you could have flipped over there and heard Joel Osteen called that church. Huh? Or you could have flipped on there and watched any number of them thousands of church stories. And that's okay if you shut in and can't get out. That's okay if you can't get somewhere. But if you're a disciple and you breathing, you belong in church on Sunday morning. All right? Y'all know I'm long-winded. I'm going to shut it down. All right? I'm going to shut it down. We are really going to Matthew. So I've enjoyed preaching to y'all. I've enjoyed talking to y'all. I've enjoyed your attentiveness, and I certainly appreciate Sozo Church for allowing me the privilege to come here. All right? Thank y'all, and amen.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to support our ministry and would like to contribute financially, you can donate online with Zelle using our email address, sozoncf@aol.com. We truly appreciate your support and generosity.